The morning sun filtered through the tall pines as I unlocked the door to my lakeside cabin. This place wasn't just wood and stone, it was a legacy, something I had fought to keep. But as soon as I stepped inside, I saw her, Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, standing in the driveway with her clipboard and permanent scowl. "Excuse me," she barked, her voice sharp enough to cut through the crisp mountain air. "You can't be here. This cabin is in violation of HOA guidelines. You need to leave immediately." I raised an eyebrow. "Karen, I own this property. You don't have the authority to throw me out," she smirked, holding up her phone like a weapon. "We'll see about that." With one dramatic flourish, she dialed 911. Moments later, the sound of sirens echoed through the valley. Deputies rolled up, lights flashing, ready to confront what they thought was a trespasser. But I didn't flinch. I knew something Karen didn't, a secret that was about to change everything. When the sheriff stepped out, Karen rushed to him, theatrically pointing at me. "This man is trespassing. He refuses to leave." The sheriff looked at me. "Sir, do you have proof of ownership?" I smiled calmly, pulling out a thick envelope from my backpack. "Proof? I have more than that. You see, this cabin is just the beginning. Karen doesn't realize who she's messing with." The deputies exchanged curious glances. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the very foundation of their precious HOA. The sheriff adjusted his hat, his eyes narrowing as he took the envelope from my hand. Karen folded her arms, smirking as though she had already won. She whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, "Finally, he'll be hauled off for trespassing." But her smugness began to falter when the sheriff actually opened the documents inside. His brow furrowed. He read carefully, flipping page after page, and with every turn, the color drained from Karen's face. "These aren't just property deeds," the sheriff muttered. "These are county land ownership records," Karen scoffed. "Oh please, anybody can print papers off the internet, he's bluffing." I stepped forward, my voice calm but firm. "Not a bluff. That cabin, it's mine. The surrounding forest, mine. The roads leading into this neighborhood, also mine. You see, Karen, when my grandfather passed away, he left me more than just a lakeside cabin. He left me ownership of half this county, and last year, after some legal disputes, I acquired the rest." The deputies looked stunned. Even the sheriff's jaw tightened. He turned to Karen. "Ma'am, these documents are real. They're notarized and recorded with the county clerk's office. This man owns not just the cabin, but the land your entire HOA sits on." Karen's mouth fell open. That can't be right. "We're the HOA! We make the rules!" I let out a dry laugh. "Correction. You made the rules, but all your power comes from owning and managing land you don't actually control. From now on, every OA decision has to go through me." Her voice cracked as she stammered. You can't do this." "Oh, but I can," I said, "and you just gave me the perfect reason." The sheriff cleared his throat, clearly enjoying Karen's unraveling. "Ma'am, you falsely reported a crime. That's a serious matter. Do you want me to add filing a false police report to your record?" Karen's eyes widened with panic. "No, Sheriff, this must be some misunderstanding." But the deputies weren't buying it. One of them leaned against his cruiser, suppressing a grin as Karen's empire of arrogance crumbled in front of us all. I tucked the documents back into my envelope and looked her square in the eyes. "Karen, you've spent years harassing homeowners, fining people for trivial things, and acting like a dictator. But today, you just called 911 on the one man who can shut your entire HOA down with a single signature." The crowd of curious neighbors who had gathered on the street began whispering. Some were even smiling. Finally, someone had stood up to the tyrant they all secretly despised. Karen's voice shook. You can't just come in and take everything away." I smirked. "Karen, you should have done your homework, because in this county, everything is already mine." The sheriff closed his notebook, looked at me, and said quietly, "Looks like you've got the upper hand here, sir. What do you want to do next? I glanced at the nervous faces of the neighbors, then back at Karen, who was trembling with rage. This, I said, is just the beginning. The sheriff's question hung in the air like smoke. All eyes were on me. Neighbors peeking from porches, kids whispering behind trees, and Karen standing frozen, her knuckles white as she clutched her clipboard. I took a slow breath, savoring the silence. What do I want to do next? I repeated. Simple. It's time to rewrite the rules. The sheriff raised an eyebrow. Rewrite the HOA rules? I nodded. Exactly. This county belongs to me, and that means this neighborhood exists on my terms. For years, Karen and her little board have bullied families over paint colors, mailbox sizes, and even lawn decorations. That ends today. A murmur rippled through the crowd. One man stepped forward nervously, his baseball cap in hand. Sir, with all due respect, are you serious? You can really put an end to all this nonsense, I smiled. More than that, I can dissolve the HOA altogether, the crowd gasped. Karen nearly choked on air. You wouldn't dare, she shrieked. Wouldn't I? I countered. Karen, you've fined people for leaving their trash cans out an extra hour. You've threatened families with lawsuits over holiday lights. You even tried to evict a veteran for building a wheelchair ramp for his disabled son. You've made this place miserable, and now justice is standing in your driveway. The baseball cap man clenched his fists, his voice trembling with long suppressed anger. You don't know what it's been like, sir. She fined me $200 for letting my daughter draw cock art on the sidewalk chalk. Others chimed in. A woman shouted, She towed my car for parking in front of my own house. Another yelled, She made me tear down my swing set because it was too tall. The air was thick with years of resentment, all boiling to the surface at once. Neighbors who had once cowered under Karen's reign were now emboldened by my presence. Karen's face flushed crimson. You people should be grateful. Without me, this neighborhood would be chaos. I brought order. I brought standards. No, I said firmly. You brought tyranny, and today, it ends. The sheriff gave a low whistle. Well, I've seen a lot in my years, but I've never seen an HOA collapse in real time. Karen stomped her foot, like a child denied a toy. You can't just erase all my work. I leaned in close, my voice dropping low enough that only she could hear. Karen, you should have thought about that before you weaponized your clipboard. This isn't your kingdom anymore. It's mine. I turned back to the crowd. Starting today, all HOA rules are suspended. No more fines. No more harassment. Live freely, take care of your homes, and respect one another. That's all I ask. The crowd erupted in applause, some even cheering. Relief washed over their faces like rain after a drought. Karen stood trembling, her clipboard now hanging limply by her side. Her reign had ended in less than an hour, and she knew it. But as the crowd celebrated, I caught the fire still burning in her eyes. Karen wasn't done, not yet. For a brief moment, the street felt lighter. Neighbors hugged, kids laughed, and even the sheriff allowed himself a small grin. Years of oppression seemed to lift in an instant. But while the crowd rejoiced, Karen's glare never wavered. Her hands shook, but her voice, though quivering, carried venom. You think this is over? She spat. You think you can waltz in here, wave a few papers around, and undo everything I've built? I'll take this higher. I'll have lawyers, judges, and county officials shut you down. The sheriff chuckled under his breath. Karen, if you're planning to fight him in court, you might want to rethink. I've seen these documents. They're airtight. He owns this land. The HOA doesn't have a leg to stand on. Karen's nostrils flared. We'll see about that. She whipped out her phone and began furiously typing, her thumb jabbing the screen like she was stabbing it. I folded my arms. What are you doing now? Her lips curled into a smug smile, calling an emergency HOA board meeting. We'll vote to fine you for trespassing, for disorderly conduct, for threatening the HOA. The neighbors groaned collectively. One woman yelled, "Karen, give it up already." But Karen wasn't listening. Within minutes, 3 of her board members, equally notorious for their pettiness, arrived, clipboards in hand. They gathered around her like soldiers, rallying behind a general. "Ladies and gentlemen," Karen announced dramatically, "the HOA board has convened. Effective immediately, we fine this man." She pointed at me with a shaky finger. $10,000 for violating HOA regulations. The crowd burst into laughter. Even the deputies couldn't keep straight faces. I raised an eyebrow. $10,000? For what exactly? For undermining HOA authority, she barked. It's a direct violation of Section 12, Article 4B. I pulled out my papers again, flipping calmly through the stack until I found the page I wanted. Karen, Section 12. Article 4B was repealed 3 years ago after the HOA lost a lawsuit to a family over a broken fence. Don't you remember? Karen froze, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Her board members exchanged uneasy glances. "And even if it hadn't been repealed," I continued, "it wouldn't matter, because the HOA doesn't own this land anymore. I do, which means every one of your bylaws is void." The neighbors erupted in cheers again. Some even began chanting, "No more HOA! No more HOA!" Karen's face turned crimson. She screamed over the noise, her voice cracking with desperation. "You haven't won yet. I'll find a way to stop you. You'll regret this day. I swear it." The sheriff stepped forward, his tone firm. "That's enough, Karen. You're done here. Pack up your clipboards and go home before you end up spending the night in a cell." Her board members hesitated, but eventually lowered their clipboards and shuffled away, defeated. Karen, however, lingered. She leaned in close to me, her voice low and bitter. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You may own the county, but you don't own me." I met her glare without flinching. "Maybe not, Karen, but I own everything you've ever tried to control, and that terrifies you." She stormed off, her heels clicking angrily against the pavement, leaving behind a trail of silence that was quickly filled by the neighbors' cheers. But deep down, I knew Karen wasn't finished. This was only her first counterattack, and the next one could be far more dangerous. The celebration after Karen's retreat was short-lived. Neighbors laughed, children played, and people thanked me for finally standing up to her. But I knew Karen too well. That fiery glare, those words she hissed at me, "This isn't over." They weren't empty threats. She was planning something. And I was right. 3 nights later, just as the moon cast silver light across the forest, I heard the sound of engines outside my cabin. I stepped onto the porch to see 2 black SUVs pulling up. Out stepped Karen, flanked by 2 men in suits, who looked more like hired muscle than HOA board members. "Evening," I said calmly, leaning against the porch railing. "Couldn't stay away, Karen?" Her voice was sharp. "You've humiliated me in front of everyone, but I'm not finished. I've brought backup this time, lawyers and enforcers who'll make sure you regret ever crossing me." The taller man in a suit stepped forward, holding a briefcase. "We're here to issue an injunction. Effective immediately. You are forbidden from interfering with HOA operations until further review." I chuckled. "Nice try. But you're standing on my land, which means your injunction isn't worth the paper it's printed on." Karen's face twisted in fury. "You can't keep hiding behind those papers. The HOA is bigger than you." "No, Karen," I said, stepping off the porch and walking toward her, my boots crunching on the gravel. "The HOA was built on intimidation, fear, and lies. And when you strip that away, what's left? Just a group of neighbors who want to live in peace. They don't need you. They never did." The shorter man in a suit leaned toward Karen. "He's right. This isn't going to hold up in court. He owns the county records. We're wasting our time." Karen spun on him, her eyes wild. "Don't you dare side with him. I'm the president of this HOA. Not anymore, I said. At that moment, headlights appeared down the road. Dozens of cars pulled up, neighbors piling out. Word had spread quickly. They weren't afraid of her anymore. They stood shoulder to shoulder in front of my cabin, a wall of ordinary people who had finally found their voice. The sheriff arrived, too, stepping out of his cruiser with a grin. "Evening, folks. Heard there was some late-night drama brewing." Karen's voice cracked as she shouted, "Sheriff! Arrest him! Arrest him right now!" But the sheriff only shook his head. "Sorry, Karen. Not only does he own this land, but you're trespassing. If anyone's getting arrested tonight, it's you." The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices echoing through the trees. Karen's face drained of color. Her so-called muscle quietly slipped back into their SUV, leaving her standing alone. For the first time, Karen looked small, powerless. I stepped forward one last time. "Karen, it's over. The HOA is dissolved. The neighbors are free, and your reign of terror ends tonight. You can fight, scream, and threaten all you want, but you've lost." Her clipboard slipped from her hands, clattering against the gravel. She stared at me, eyes burning with defeat, then turned and stormed back to her SUV. With a screech of tires, she was gone. The sheriff tipped his hat. "Well, that's that. Looks like peace has finally returned to the county." I looked at the crowd, at the smiling faces that had once been shadowed by fear. No more fines. No more harassment. This land belongs to the people now. The neighbors erupted again, chanting in unison. No more HOA, no more HO. And as I stood there under the moonlight, I realized something. The battle wasn't just about property lines or paperwork. It was about freedom. And tonight, freedom had won.